Sorry, but we just get a quick sound check from you.
Breakfast this morning, leg of Tessa jowl with mint sauce. You know, my interest had turned to these kind of airport walks, which in a way were still about the liminal. They were still about interzones. In that, I thought it was fascinating that very few people had a kind of physical knowledge of the progression from the inner urban area to the rural, and particularly that they didn't have a sense, you know, I like this idea of subverting prescribed folkways. So by walking to airports, you're, in my view, subverting the way that you're meant to travel more completely than any other kind of movement, because it's sort of just not the done thing to do that. I mean, I remain a kind of mecha, a kind of doer in the Yiddish formulation. So, you know, I kind of walk to an airport because I've got to get a flight. It's satirizing and ironizing the idea of that kind of travel, but I still do it. And I remember walking with Nick. I was living outside Oxford. I remember walking with him, not on the Ridgeway, but bisecting the Ridgeway, at the concrete works beyond Prince's Risborough, and then walking up into hills there. Your stamping ground, in fact, John, around there. I remember taking walks with him around there when I was living up outside Tame. That would have been in the early 90s. I think I remember walking with Nick out at the Isle of Grain as well, another of my favourites for that kind of really extending that idea of the liminal into landscapes, topographies that are under-imagined in that way. You know, the Grain for me was the great under-imagined place. I mean, even though, of course, it features in Conrad's Art of Darkness, it features in Celine's Mortachedi, it features in Dickens. It's the opening of Great Expectations, not actually on Grain, but on the marshes between Gravesend and the Isle of Grain. I remember going out there with Nick, perhaps a fraudulent memory. He would probably remember better than I. Those kinds of walks, those kind of interzonal walks. So, I mean, you could say, I mean, certainly I have a programmatic view of these places. I think that, you know, in as much as we fail to view them as beautiful, so we are committed to making our environment uglier, if you see what I mean. In other words, our willingness to abandon romantic conceptions of both the urban and the rural, and to embrace the liminal, which is what I think a lot of these places are about. You know, our willingness to do that is a sign that we're kind of prepared to engage with the totality of our environment. Whether or not that's the view Nick takes, I'm doubtful. I think he sees it as a much more personal heuristic about, you know, how he kind of navigates his life and his psyche and his beliefs. I'm not so convinced that he is quite so political in that way. Certainly that's my view, that there is. But I mean, having said that, with the caveat that I'm not even certain that I don't tack on that kind of political and social dimension to it in order to justify the fact that I just like these places. You know, like Nick, I grew up in, you know, the fringes of the Hampstead Garden suburb in North London, East Finchley, and in many ways it's a way of exalting or romanticising a childhood that was in some senses, you know, perceived from outside in an ineffably dull place, you know, maybe. But of course every childhood has its romance, you know, it's inescapable.